everybody, Chris Larson from CrossbowExpert.com. Today I want to talk about how to sight in your variable power crossbow scope. Now, a lot of guys that are switching over from rifle to crossbow are pretty familiar with variable power crossbow scope. Basically, it means that you can adjust the magnification on your scope. Now, with the deer rifle, a lot of times if you're hunting in the woods, you're going to set that thing at maybe 2 or 3 power. Just a pretty low magnification so you can see the deer up close, but you're still getting some magnification. Now, if you're going to go out west, or maybe you're going to hunt a big cornfield or something, you may dial that up 7, 8, 9 power just so that you can reach out there and see the deer better if it's at 100, 200 yards. Now, with the crossbow scope, that variable power works a little bit different. And what you'll notice when you get your scope is that instead of having like a 2 or a 9 on it, it has high numbers, and those numbers correlate with the speed of the crossbow. And basically what this does by adjusting the magnification is it creates an optical illusion of moving the crosshairs closer or further to get closer together or further apart. So what that does is it allows this crossbow scope, whether it be like this is a tack zone, a Twilight DLX from Excalibur, a Rangemaster from 10 Point, this is a Hawk XB1, the Hawk XB30. There's a lot of different variable power scopes out there, but what it does is it allows those lines to line up for you so that your 20, you can set at 20, and your 60 is going to hit at 60 no matter if this crossbow's shooting at 350 feet per second or 400 feet per second. It allows that scope to work for you no matter what crossbow you put it on. So how you sight these in, a lot of people ask us, do I need to go and shoot my crossbow through a chronograph? The answer is no, and I actually recommend that you don't shoot it through a chronograph because, as we'll get into in a little bit, it's actually going to mess up how you do this. So what you're going to do, you take your turret caps off, you're going to sight the crossbow in at 20 yards using the center line, the top reticle, using those turrets, your elevation and your windage using those turrets at 20 yards. And once you get to that 20, move your target out to 30. And you really want to use a rangefinder to do this. If you got to use a tape measure, use a tape measure. A rangefinder is going to be best, but don't just pace this off because you're not going to get the readings you want by pacing it off. So what you're going to do, shoot at 30. And what I would do before I start shooting 30 is I'm going to set my speed dial at about the speed I think my crossbow shoots. So set it, maybe this is a 355. We think, oh, it's probably going to shoot around 350. And again, Crossbow or Excalibur does ship their crossbows with 150 grain points. So if you're using 150 grain points, the crossbow is actually going to get about 20 feet per second less. So if you want to get the speed that's advertised in the Excalibur, make sure you're shooting 100 grain points. But we're going to set this at about the speed we think it's going to shoot, and we're going to shoot at 30 yards using the second line in our scope. See where we're hitting consistently. Now, if we're hitting consistently low, what we're going to do is drop the speed down on that crossbow, and again, shoot until everything is good as far as our height goes until we find that spot. So let's say it's at 340. We find our spot. That's the spot that's hitting consistently. And once we're there, we're going to leave it alone. We're set. Everything is good. Now, if you think you're going to be shooting at 60 yards quite a bit, maybe you hunt food plots and you may have some longer shots, what I would do is set your crossbow target out at 60 yards and test it and see where you hit. By testing it at 30 yards, our 60 yards is going to be pretty close, but you may have to adjust it one way or another just a little bit to get it so it hits right at 60. But make sure you do that 30 before you go out to 60, because a lot of people think their crossbow shoots 350, and if they're using a heavier arrow, it really shoots 320 or 330, and then they lose a bunch of arrows. So do it at 30 first, so that way you're hitting paper, you're not going to lose arrows, and then check it out at 60. Now, I talked about a chronograph a little bit earlier. Here's the reason why you don't want to use a chronograph. So let's say I've got 2 different crossbows shooting 2 different arrows. I've got this big 24-inch arrow, big heavy arrow, and I shot this through a crossbow at 350 feet per second. And then I took this lighter, smaller arrow, shot it through a different crossbow at 350 feet per second. So both arrows coming right out of the crossbow into the chronograph are shooting 350 feet per second. But obviously both of them will have a very different point of impact at 60 yards. So shooting through the chronograph is really not going to do you any good. The range method that I just discussed is going to be the way to do it. And once you get that set up, you don't really want to mess around with it. If you do set it, maybe you think, hey, you know, tonight I'm only going to be shooting 20 yards in. I'm in a real deep forest type situation. If you do end up messing with this, your 20 will still hit. You're never going to change that 20, but it will change your other points of impact. So if you do move this at some point later on, make sure that you go back and sight it all back in it. But your 20 never changes. So for more crossbow information, check us out. Check out our blog at crossbowexpert.com.